When Emily moved into her grandmother's old Victorian house, she was enchanted by its antique furniture and creaking wooden floors. But there was one thing she couldn't ignore: the bathroom mirror. At first, it seemed ordinary, just old glass with a gilded frame. But after a few weeks, she noticed something strange. When she brushed your teeth or washed your face, her reflection seemed delayed. A blink that came a second too late, a tilt of the head that didn't quite match. One night, Emily stayed up late, unable to sleep. She stood in front of the mirror, staring into her own tired eyes. Minutes passed in silence. Then, without warning, her reflection smiled. Her own lips had not moved. Frozen in terror, Emily stumbled backward, but her reflection stayed close to the glass, grinning wider and wider. For a moment, she swore she saw its hands press against the inside of the mirror, as if it were trying to push through. From that night on, she covered every mirror in the house. But sometimes, even in the dark, she can feel a smile watching her.
It was a stormy night in 1976 when Thomas, a long-distance truck driver, noticed a figure standing by the side of the road. A young woman, soaked to the bone, was waving for help. He pulled over and let her climb into the cab. She wore a pale dress, old-fashioned, like something from the 1950s. She spoke softly, asking if he could take her home. They drove in silence for a while. She barely moved, staring out the window, whispering something Thomas couldn't quite hear. Finally, she gave him an address. When they arrived, Thomas turned to tell her they had reached her house, only to find the passenger seat empty. His heart pounded as he knocked on the door of the small farmhouse. An elderly man opened, his face pale when Thomas described the girl. "My daughter," the man whispered. "She died in a car accident on this road, 30 years ago."
In a remote cabin deep within the Appalachian woods, the Carter family had grown used to the isolation. But in the fall of 1992, something began disturbing their nights. At exactly 3:15 a.m. every night, there was a knock on the front door. 3 sharp knocks, always the same. When they opened the door, no one was ever there. At first, they thought it was a prank, but soon the knocks grew louder, more aggressive. The family dog refused to go near the door after dark, growling at something unseen. One night, the father decided to wait by the door, shotgun in hand. At exactly 3:15, the knocks came again. He swung the door open, empty air. But when he looked down, he froze. Muddy footprints led into the cabin from the outside. The prints stopped in the middle of the living room. There were no prints leading back out. The Carters left the cabin the very next day. Michael was just 15 when the nightmares began. He would wake in the dead of night, his body paralyzed, unable to scream, as a tall, shadowy figure loomed in the corner of his room. Its outline was human, but wrong. Too tall. Its limbs stretched unnaturally long, its head bent at an impossible angle. At first, Michael convinced himself it was sleep paralysis. But then his younger brother, who sometimes slept over, ran screaming one night. He described seeing a man made of smoke standing in the same corner. The figure never moved, never spoke, just watched. Years later, Michael moved out of that house, but even as an adult, the shadow sometimes returns. Always in the corner of the room, always watching. And when he closes his eyes, he hears a low whisper, "Not yet." In a small rural town, there was an abandoned railway that hadn't been used for decades. Locals whispered about a ghost train that still thundered down the tracks once a year on the anniversary of a terrible accident. In 1953, a passenger train had derailed, killing nearly everyone on board. One autumn night, a group of teenagers decided to test the legend. They camped near the tracks, laughing at the idea of a phantom train. But just after midnight, they heard it. The distant whistle of an engine, the rattling of wheels. The ground trembled beneath them as a beam of light appeared down the abandoned line. Through the thick fog, a massive locomotive roared past, its windows glowing faintly. Inside, pale faces stared back at them, mouths open in silent screams. The sound of screeching metal filled the air as the train rushed by. And then it was gone. No tracks disturbed, no sound remaining. The next morning, the teenagers swore they would never return. And one of them, years later, admitted he still dreams of the faces pressed against the glass, staring at him, begging to be freed.